Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you being here with us. Welcome to our Empowering Learners webinar. This webinar is part of the Go Lumio series, where we're providing best teaching practices with Lumio. My name is Holly Schell. I am a digital content manager from Oregon, and our webinar today is Empowering Every Learner using Lumio, UDL, and AAC to amplify student voice and inclusion. Our presenter today, Rachel Gautreaux, is having some technical difficulties, so we are waiting for her to be able to join us. When she does join us, let me tell you that she is the special education chair, diagnostic kindergarten teacher, and digital lead learner from the Toronto District School Board. We do love your participation. We want to get you engaged and involved. Rachel's got lots of fantastic things prepared for you. So please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat during the presentation. Either I will answer them myself in the chat, or we will hold them. We'll have them answered during the Q&A period, or Rachel will just answer them during the flow of the presentation. I'm also going to be sharing resources for you during in the chat and then at the end of the presentation. Additionally, for participating today, we'll give you a certificate that's going to be provided for you at the end of the presentation after you complete a brief survey. All right, we are finally in business, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as you stuck with us. So I just dropped a link. Oh, nope, hold on. Let me drop that again. Here we go. There's the link. I just dropped a link in the chat. If you go ahead and click that link, you'll be able to join our Lumio lesson and you can participate with us, and we can all be interacting together.
Hi, John.
All right, so we'll get everyone to please feel free to join the lesson. And also there's now a little, let's see. All right, so okay, Rachel, take it away.
Perfect. So my name is Rachel Gautreaux. My background is in child and youth work, actually. I started as a child and youth worker, and then I went on to pursue a master's in child studies and education. I am currently a special education specialist with over 12 years of experience in special education. I just couldn't leave it. I love what I do. I love serving the students that I serve, and I learned so much from the multidisciplinary teams that I work with. I could not do any of what I do without these teams and without these team members. It really is a village. So I teach Diagnostic Kindergarten currently, and I previously taught kind of a unicorn class, which was virtual DD ISP grades 6 to 8, which is why Lumio was such a game changer for us. And that is why I'm here.
Fantastic. All right, tell us about your webinar here.
Hey, so today we're going to be learning about combining Lumio, UDL, and AAC to enhance student voice and choice. Especially virtually, I really struggled with finding ways to empower learners to use their voices if they were minimally verbal or if they were emergent communicators. So today we're going to explore Lumio's innovative UDL tools and accessibility features. Specifically, the audio features, which is so exciting. I've demonstrated some ways that we can use attaching audio to different visuals today. We are going to look at introducing AAC and adopting digital lessons, tasks, and assessments, making sure that students have visuals they're familiar with and ways to communicate and participate. And we're going to look at using visual schedules and First Then to foster inclusion and empower student voice. So here's a little shout it out, and we use this activity to kind of interact with you and find out how do AAC visual supports make it easier for us to engage students and emergent communicators in expressing their ideas, their thoughts, and their interests. Are there some ways that you're seeing this right now? Are you using visuals in your classroom? What are some ways that you find AAC or visuals helpful to your students in expressing themselves? It could be things like making choices. It could be things like routines. It could be things like expressing a dislike or an interest. All of those things are valid, and our students have so many ideas to share with us. What kinds of things are you seeing or doing in your classroom or your
So
spaces?
on your Lumia screen, you're seeing this is our shout it out feature. So you've got a box for you to type
And
your
I
answer
put it
in.
anonymously, I believe, for this one. I think I made it anonymous. So you won't see our name. You'll just see ideas, I believe. Oh, maybe not for
There we
this
go.
one. Thank you.
Now it's anonymous.
Okay.
So please feel free to type your answer in the response there. Let us know how you can imagine that the AAC visual supports would make it easier for emergent communicators.
And there's a little follow-up after this as well. So you'll see there's a reason I'm asking this question. Maybe you're not using visuals yet, and that's okay. It's just a way for us to see if there's any ways that you're already incorporating visuals in your classroom, or maybe you're new to AAC and visuals. I was when I started Diagnostic Kindergarten. It was very new to me. And honestly, I learned so much from our speech language pathologists and our support staff team at our school because they had all been working with these visuals for years. It's a huge wealth of information. Okay. And mine's still loading, but I think I was able to open it, but I can't. For one thing, when you're starting Lumio, you can see that it's really, really small on your screen. But if we click on it, we can make it larger and then see it, which is really helpful when we're looking at our ideas and sharing those ideas with each other.
Awesome. Got some great ideas coming in here. Thanks everyone for sharing your participation. Awesome. All right.
Okay, so here's our follow-up question. These are some things that were actually new to me when I was learning about AACs. Visuals allow more time to process information, which explains why I'm a visual learner. I always needed a little bit more time to understand what was being taught to me, which is why I stuck with visuals always. I found them so fascinating and amazing to look at, and I was just drawn to them. And I know all of our students in our classroom are too. They give us more time, which is great. And for a visual learner, we're processing that information more. Visuals also assist us in remembering. Using some of the same words every time the visual is shown, it teaches our students or our children these core words, and that is a double way to process this information and have it stick to our brains. And words disappear right after we say them. Visuals hold time and space and direct our attention to them. So it's one of the things that was new to me. I didn't really think of words as disappearing. But that's why maybe ourselves and our students like having our visual schedule up and visuals around the classroom, because it doesn't disappear. It's there. It means we're predictable and we're stable and we have structure, and that helps. Okay, so today we're going to take a look at some examples of ways to foster UDL inclusion and using our AAC visuals and visual schedules. So when I first started out, I didn't have access to Lumio or things like this where I could integrate these. I had BoardMaker, but that was a little bit difficult to do virtually. So I wanted to find a way to make sure that all communication was welcome, whether it was gestures, whether it was words, whether students were expressing themselves on an AAC device, which actually at the time none of my students had, so I had to get creative. And now Lumio has these amazing audio features where we can actually use it almost as if it's an AAC device virtually. So there are key forms of communication, and we want to make sure that we're recognizing all of these in our students, whether it's words, writing, sign language, eye gaze, AAC, gestures. I gesture a lot. Some people might gesture more than others, and facial expressions. You can tell a lot by a student whether they're communicating with you or not through their facial expressions, and we're helping our students recognize other facial expressions so that they understand our emotions. So there are 3 ways to transform our learning with Lumio, UDL, and AAC. Number 1, we can increase student accessibility to learning. We want to make sure that students have access to what we're teaching them. And sometimes that access comes in the form of AAC or visuals that they're familiar with, or things or pictures that they understand and know. And we are chunking our information, we're decreasing that amount that we have to teach them into a smaller amount so they can process it and actually communicate and participate with us. Number two, ignite student engagement, empower student voice and choice. I love using the game features and things like that with my students because, and you'll see why, they get so excited at being successful at different activities, and you'll see that later on. It's very fun. And number three, we want to check for student understanding with adapted assessments, audio, cues, and AAC. And these adapted assessments are things you can actually use in Lumio and create, or you can bring in things that you already have, and students can begin to self-check their work, which I will show you some examples of in a minute. So this is all research-based, and this is what was so amazing to me when I started looking at it. Lumio actually has a logic model that is based on UDL. So all of the activities, all of the strategies in Lumio are based on this model of engagement, representation, and action and expression. So students all feel included, they're all engaged. My students were instantly engaged once we started using Lumio. It's all based on science and research.
We even have, Rachel, a UDL toolkit that is built for Lumio that I will drop the link for that in the chat so that everyone can explore that. Got some great activities that are totally aligned to the UDL framework. So It's a fantastic resource.
So we're going to do a little activity. We're going to set some positive affirmations for this new year. And this is actually an activity I do at the beginning of the year with my students. And I usually do it in midway through the year as well. They self-select these icons and these visuals that they relate to. And we can do it on the smartboard, or we might do it on their device, but it's something very simple. They don't need a lot of tools to do it. It's something they're just clicking and dragging, and you're going to get a chance to do it too. Because when we think and set positive affirmations, it kind of sets the direction for the tone of where we're going. So we're going to set some positive affirmations, and you are going to see some visuals, just like I would use in my classroom, and you're going to click and drag the ones that you identify with for your positive affirmations.
Right, let's look at the teacher version of this page so everyone understands what to do on this. There we go.
So you'll see on the left, you'll see I am, I can be, I will, today will be, and I am. It's almost like you're making a little poem about yourself. And I told my students that too when we were working on it. We were just looking, and it might be different every time. They might like the same visuals, but it's there. We're empowering them to make the choice and them to make these. And it's not something that requires a lot, so we can meet them all where they're at.
And you'll see, everyone, that these images over here are draggable, so you can drag the ones that best fit to you, to yourself, to build your own affirmation. So we'll give you a minute to build your own affirmation, and then what would be fantastic when you're done and you're ready that we can take a look at what you built for your affirmation. Just check there's a done box over here in the corner for you. Just check that, and then that'll be our cue that we can take a look at the affirmation you built for yourself. What's your I am for today, Rachel?
So my I am is I am kind.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, it's always good to practice being kind.
You always see those students who love their friends and love to socialize. They're always like, I'm a good friend. And you're just this is so unique to them. And I love that it expresses who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Ooh, I can be a good friend. We can bring that one over, right?
And sometimes they choose the same ones because they recognize that and it's familiar to them.
Yeah.
But sometimes they surprise you. We think that they're doing something. And I'll get to that later, where we think we know what a student is trying to say. We think we know what they're going to do or be, but we're wrong. Sometimes they surprise us with all of these things. And that's why I love visuals, because they can show us something that we might not even expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see if anyone's, oh, fantastic. Look at all these people ready to share theirs. You guys are the best.
Yay.
Oh, great. Great job, Debbie. I love this.
So awesome.
I love the I am
Yay.
one at the end. Thanks, Debbie. Let's see.
That
Ingrid.
is so true.
Ooh, Ingrid's going to be strong today. Nice. That's awesome.
And you can always switch it up too with different visuals that you have. If you're using ProLoco, these are Tobii Dynavox, but if you're using ProLoco and those are more familiar to your students, you can always save those as well. Or you can use real pictures and add words underneath too. Lumio is a world of possibilities for that.
Yeah, these are all fantastic. Thanks everyone for sharing these with you. It is true that Merritt is a hard worker. She is a fan of, and she is a fantastic person to always have around. Thanks everyone for sharing with us. Should we keep going, Rachel?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so for visual schedules, you're probably already using them if you're working in special education because it really provides a sense of predictability, a sense of just flow throughout the day. All of our students rely on that in terms of knowing what comes next. So it fosters student independence and autonomy. It develops their self-regulation and executive functioning skills. Sometimes that takes longer than others, but it works on that every day. Students work on that every day with small and big transitions, whether it's coming into school and leaving or going from class to class. Some of the bigger transitions are going from new school to new school or things like that. Or summer, we usually use visuals for the first day and last day of school, or when there's no school or there's a field trip. Those are always really important. Whenever I have a calendar, I always double check that because students and parents like to know what's coming up. And then we try to provide familiar visuals for highly predictable structure. Students thrive on structure in our programs, and we do too. So it's helpful for all of us to just be on the same page and know what we're doing. And when students are able to, they can start switching up the schedule. They can start relying on that and self-checking and seeing what we have today or selecting, making choices for the calendar. They develop skills to manage changes in daily routines. Those unexpected fire drills, the assemblies, things like that, school closures, these things come up really quickly. So we try to have some sort of notice and put those up so students have an idea, especially with the sounds that are involved in some of them, just to prepare and have a transition after. And then another thing we try to do is I love the feature that Lumio already has check marks. That's amazing because before this, I was just drawing them on. That's an example of one of my virtual DB students from when I was teaching virtually, and she loved seeing that little check mark or something there that was in real time. That was amazing. I taught a whole year without Lumio, and when we had this, it was a game changer. All of a sudden, students were so excited. They were self-selecting their 100% and their A pluses, and they were really excited to put the stars there. And they knew when they were correct or not. They would tell me. So they would actually use those. So you can use the Infinite Cloner to clone these check marks and have students self-select that. Of course, they might put a lot on there, but that's okay. They're really excited about their success, and that's awesome. Students can follow schedules on Lumio and use different activities to check and self-check throughout the day. So here's a little thing that I created. I used a lot of sound buttons. I'm hoping it's going to work, and I'm going to let you try it out later. I've also included, you'll see up in the top right, there is some audio there. So one of the amazing things about Lumio is they've included some audio features where you can record instructions for that page for students to listen to. This is especially helpful when students are at home and they're doing student-paced work, or when a student needs to hear those instructions again, because not all of us are auditory learners. So when we have both visuals and auditory, that can really help learners reach the curriculum or reach where we're supposed to be. I needed both. A lot of students need both. And this is an example of an IEP goal that we would use for transitions, independence, or daily living. I can complete my morning entry routines independently and check off each step until I complete 10 steps with 80% accuracy during 3 out of 5 observed opportunities. This allows for gradual release of responsibility. They develop this independence by checking it off. And of course, maybe it's just one check mark the first time. Maybe we've only gotten to the 5th stage. Maybe for some students, we're going to make that a lot shorter. But in our class, this is actually our entry routine. I changed the visual because we have a bin, not a basket. But this is our entry routine every day. We're not all there yet at the beginning of the year, but some students are doing amazing and we let them know, and all the students can achieve this. They are all working towards that goal. Their goal might be different, but we are all capable, and Lumio gives us the tools. If you click on one of the sound buttons, I've actually recorded the instructions in each sound button, and Lumio allows you to attach a sound button to different visuals. So now if you have a visual that you might have used in BoardMaker and heard the text, now we can actually record ourselves saying the word or the visual, attach it to the visual by grouping it together, and then students can play that at home or at school on their device. They don't have to ask us where it is. They don't have to use BoardMaker. They actually have this and they can use this on any device. You're going to get a chance to try it out just to see what that looks like. So you can move the check mark, it's infinitely cloned. You can try listening to one of, just understand that I have been sick, so my voice might be a little scratchy, but you'll see that when you click on the sound button, it has a little step for each task. And not all students might need this, but it could be helpful for those students that might need some prompting. And actually, that's something we usually write into their IEP goals, whether they need a visual and verbal prompt, whether they just need a verbal prompt. And we try to eventually decrease those prompts over time. So that is our gradual release of responsibility.
I love this. So fun. I love the way you've combined, the visual, the verbal listening, and then also like they can read it, right? So we've got all of our different methods of communication. And so for those of you that are doing it on your own, you see we've got our infinitely cloned checkbox, and you can drag it off to the things maybe you took off your coat today. All of those things are ready for you there.
And we have some students. So we have some students right now that won't do it unless they have a visual in front of them. If it's our voice, they're like, no, I'm not doing it. But if they see a visual, they're already reading it and they're already just looking at it and saying, okay, I kind of have to do it now.
And just as a little, here's the tip of how to do it. If you hit any of these objects, if you click the drop down button, here you'll see attach audio. This is how, as a teacher, you can attach your audio, but students are also able to attach their audio, which is a whole nother fantastic possibilities of ways for students to show their learning. So super fun. All right. I'm assuming that, see, Merritt's checked off hers. Oh, Merritt did everything today. Good job, Merritt.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And you can have an arrival and exit routine for different students. Maybe some students don't need that. Some students are already there, but it's just helpful for them to know we're doing the same thing every day.
Yep. Yeah. That visual reinforcement is so key, isn't it? Yeah, fantastic. Ooh, first then, we love sequencing. Talk to us about this, Rachel.
Okay, so every day we use actually that first, then the first next, and the first next. We use those. I use those in my daily slides. I'll have them up in the classroom. When we come in, it's already on the smartboard. It's already there. It's just the visual, but now I can add audio. So that's kind of exciting. So now we have, just when we're coming in from our transition, students know that we are going from washing our hands to having snack. It's always washing hands to having lunch. We're always doing that first. But a big thing with the boots now, we have a lot of snow here. We have to do the socks, shoes, boots, or we have to take off the boots and then the shoes. So that's been a big process because in the fall, we didn't have to do that. So we're really trying to structure it so that students can be independent on their own. And I've made those so you can actually click and drag the one in the middle, the first, next, last. That is for more complicated tasks. If you have a student who is working from 1 to 3 expectations, you can use that as a way. And there's even more. There's more you could do first, next, then last. It just depends on what your student's working at. But we always do a first, next for any little transitions throughout the day, just as a prompt. If we're playing with the toys, and I have a visual for that too, where we're playing with the toys and then it's clean up, just so they know at the end of this, we are going to be tidying up these toys.
Awesome. All right, let's do this one.
Here is an important idea that I learned from actually the staff at our school. Students have things to tell us always. They may not be able to communicate that. So I tried to think of the most important visuals for students to have, and I found lots of examples out there for students because they have things to tell us. Maybe it's an urgent need. Maybe it's they don't have something they need. Maybe they're hungry, thirsty. Those are the usually ones, the ones that we see. But maybe it's just something they need help. They're not able to communicate that. So what I did virtually is I had students click and drag the circle. Some of my students were, that's the one thing, some students were able to circle, some students clicked and dragged, and I'm working towards putting a little sound button in each one of these as well so that students can actually hear it and then know. Sometimes they know the visuals, they're familiar with them, but in case they don't, for those odd things, there's even one for body parts. If your part of your body is hurting, my head hurts or my arm hurts, these are expressive rights that everyone has, but not every student has the ability to communicate that. So trying to find those things. My students' parents always ask me for, do you have a dentist one? Do you have a doctor one? Because a lot of students are afraid of going to the dentist. So for them being able to express themselves when they're worried or anxious or they're in a situation they're unfamiliar with, that was really important to me so that students can advocate for themselves.
What I love about this, Rachel, too, is that it's such an equity, it's a tool for equity, right? Because you might have a student that doesn't have their own AAC device. Well, Now they do. They have Lumio, right? And
They
so
do.
every
We are
student,
currently doing paperwork for all of them, but it's going to be probably a year process.
it's a lot of paperwork. It's a long process, but in the meantime, we've got there and learning those symbols and learning how to communicate. And yeah, so fantastic. Love it. Yeah. And yeah, the circle of what, yeah, what do you
I
need?
do these for self-regulation too. I do these for sensory needs. I always do a sensory profile for my students when they come in, finding out because some students are undersensitive to certain things and some students are hyposensitive to things. So finding out which students need to bounce a little bit more, which students need quiet, which students like loud music. It's such a mix. Sometimes they're half and half. Everyone is different and unique in that way. So I always have students do a sensory profile where they get to choose the things they like.
Love that.
And then we have a better understanding of their triggers or things like that. Okay, this was exciting because back when I started with music and slides and things like that, I didn't have these sound buttons. And so students were I had to start using visuals like this, 1 and 2. So my nonverbal students would do 1 for choice 1 and 2 for choice 2. Now, there are so many other features in Lumio where they can make choices if I was teaching virtually. So I put a little 1, but I also put a sound saying 1, 1, and I put the title of the song in the sound button. So for any of your students, if you're doing circle time or you're doing music and you're doing choices, this allows students to come up to the board or use their device. And if you I used to have a laminated page where I had like song choices, and you can still do that. Lots of people do. I still do sometimes. I have them around the board. But this is a way for students to use their device or come up to the board and self-select in a way that is easy for them and they can hear the audio cue and visual. So they have both.
So if I click right here, this plays the whole song or it plays the
So
name of the song?
that is I'm saying what the song is. And what I would
Okay.
always do is I would have both songs queued up. I used to
Mm,
have them on the
perfect.
page, but I'd have them queued up because I love the ad-free version of that. No other Cocoa Melons on there. So I just have the ad. I would have both songs in case they picked one or the other. And I would have those in a slide deck. And that way, whichever one they chose, I just skip to that page.
Oh, love that. That's so fun.
And then here's your chance to explore it if you wanted to take a look at it and just see what it sounds like, what it looks like. I also included instructions on the page, and that's something you can do for your students that might be learning from home that day or for students that are working kind of at their own pace.
Fantastic. And for those of you joining us, we'll give you the link to this file here so that you can explore all these activities later and
I
yeah,
made a
explore
longer
them on.
version of these so that you can use them right away. So this is an example of one that I've used with my student when I was teaching virtually. So this student actually had cortical vision impairment, which means that she was at home and she had this tiny little laptop and she couldn't see most things that were on a white background. So that meant I really had to get creative about how I was presenting these visuals because all visuals are mostly on a white background. So what I did is I researched a little bit about CVI, and what I learned is it has to be a darker contrasting background and you have to have really bright, large, bold text. So I started making things that were a little bit bigger and that were on dark backgrounds. So if you want to do this in Lumio, all you have to do is create one of those rectangles, make it black or a darker color, put it in the background, and then you can put all of your visuals on and students are able to grasp that. And that's if you have a student who has blind low vision or cortical vision impairment. It's just another way to be more accessible with how you're doing your virtual or your in-person instruction.
It's a fantastic tip. And so often the things, as we know, this is the whole point of UDL, the things we do for one student end up being better for everybody. So yeah.
And then here's a fun little activity. Okay, so you probably do zones of regulation in your classroom or some form of self-regulation. You might use visuals. I find a lot of students really need help after transitions or before transitions, managing those feelings, or after a weekend or a holiday. So we're going to try it ourselves. You can use one of the icons. And the nice thing about Lumio is they already have all these icons in here. They also have emotion stickers. So you can even make your own with your own emotion stickers. And I put the title of what it is for each emotion there. And I've told students what they're doing, but you can choose one of those icons and click and drag to where you feel. We do this every day with our students in the morning and in the afternoon. I usually use their faces. So they see their face and they put it under where they are. And some students are doing this very independently. Some students see they're silly or their engine's running really high. So they're doing that and they're excited to see. Some students, they just like certain faces and they kind of gravitate towards those. But other students, they're really using this as a check-in to see how they're feeling.
I
And some
love
students,
the idea of using their faces, but also to use the adorable stickers. I mean,
they're
all of,
so cute.
yeah.
I have students that love ocean creatures of any kind. And so it's nice to have those options now.
Yeah, so some of you are already playing with it. You can grab any one of these icons over here and drag it to the emotion you're feeling. And for, what's great about it as a teacher too, is that if I click here, and I can do this now or I can do it later, I can see, oh, Merritt added the Bali sticker. So I can see which of my students have added those things. And yeah, I can do this right now, but I can also later go back and, kind of get that, get the insight into how they're doing.
And another thing I'm going to add to the resources that I'm sending out, that I'm sending to you guys, is I have a toolbox. So the next thing we do after we do those check-ins is throughout the year, we look at ways that students can be regulating their bodies. So I haven't put that here because it's a little bit longer. Students get to self-select different tools for when they're in those different zones. So I'll add that to there, and it's a whole bunch of things. You can add your own visuals too. I added Play-Doh. I added things like a sensory tool. There's some students that like the weighted toys. So that's there, and you can put their face up at the top, and then they can just self-select different tools, and that can be part of their IEP goal or just a transition strategy, and they're really helpful for that. And
That's
here's a
such a
quote that really
fantastic idea.
this quote really stuck with me. In order to be inclusive, we must actively seek to understand and appreciate the unique intersections of identities that individuals hold. And that's not just one identity. Most of our students, all of our students, including us, have multiple identities, and they intersect, and they might be different, they might be the same, but we all have multiple identities. So it's so important to not just see our students where they are now, but to see that they have so many different layers to them. And with AAC, and I learned this so much from the team that I'm working with and from the SLPs that I'm working with, value and include learners at all starting points, abilities and levels of communication, and always presume competence. Even if a student's not talking yet, even if a student doesn't seem to be communicating or indicating a need or a want, they have them, they're going to come across. And the more that we presume and build them up and show them that we are making those connections with them, they start to try and they start to use their AAC, or they start to, maybe they're already gesturing and they're already doing those things. It's about the connection. It's about the understanding that we value any mode of communication. So here are some examples of my students using these. So there's one name activity that I did, and it was, I created letters using Lumio letters. I made them in gray, and then I locked them in place, and then I made other letters that were in black. And some of students could actually click and drag them. Other students prefer to trace their name, but that's a goal that we're doing. And some students actually do better on the smartboard than on paper. That was interesting to find out. And then the matching activity that we had, I put their faces on there. So they could match two different pictures of their faces and get to know their friends' names at the beginning of the year and their teachers' names. So they loved that activity, and also the turn-taking part of it. That was a big part of our class.
Good job.
So not for us, without us. Meeting all learners where they're at instead of where they're expected to be. For authentic student voice. Presuming and fostering competence through UDL and assistive technology, Lumio Smart AAC, overriding prior e-learning limitations and barriers. Our exceptional students will use their empowered voices to transform virtual education platforms and illuminate the path to inclusive and accessible instruction. We really want to presume competence and hear students' voices and what they have to say, because they have so much to say and they say it in so many different ways. Using different types of assistive technology, visuals, using drawings that they've created. They share with us in so many ways what they like and what they like to do. Might take longer for some, but the question is for either virtual or in-person instruction. Students have different rights that they may not come across when considering research and which voices are not present in that research. That directly impacts them. Are reluctant to answer, neurospicy, not yet communicating learners, what would they tell us about the instruction or digital learning supports they would benefit from? What do you think they might say or advocate for? My students will probably say more time to play, but I don't know that because they don't have those tools. Not all of them have access to an AAC device, but when they do, there's so much we can learn from them. And they love Lumio because it gives them that voice and choice to try and do all of these things that express their needs and their wants. So I'm going to go to our next page here. Okay, so I'll save that for another time. So I am conscious of how much time we have. And I just wanted to share some examples of things that I've used. So this is another way that I use check marks. I incorporated different visuals that I had found where students could choose a number or a visual and they could check mark themselves. And I love doing, I know it sounds difficult for younger grades, but having students reflect on different books and their favorite books. Try to let students self-select their books or have a visual of different books. They will show you which one's their favorite, and you can even have an audio clip of that. And it's so fun to see their voices shown when they express themselves, whether it's their favorite character. When you use visuals that are connected to their interests, they are so much more engaged. And you can do that with Lumio because it allows you to use those tools in Lumio. So I'm going to show you. An infinite cloner has been a game changer. This is an example, and we'll share that in the other slides, of a communication goal and looking at how students can use different devices or modes of communication to communicate. It might be saying their name, identifying their name, and we do that on the smartboard, but it could be also writing. There are so many modes of ways to communicate that goal. So we look at a long-term goal, and this is just a little kind of shouted out that I was hoping to see what you might think of. This is just a little prompt. What is it about transitions, big or small, being stuck in a crowded place or a new country that makes a place uncomfortable and unwelcoming? This kind of stuck with me last night when I was thinking about how our students get overwhelmed in transitions or during transitions or when we're in the gym, especially for assemblies or when it's really loud or when we're transitioning to a new class. What might be the reason they're so uncomfortable? Or for ourselves, in the past when you were a child or recently, maybe when I was in the airport, what makes a place maybe scary or uncomfortable if it's new? And it could have been your own experiences. What are some things that might come across in that way that might be, unfamiliar if it's new? I always get anxious when something is new. I don't know what to expect. And my students are very similar that way. And not so if you're not sure, if you have no idea what to expect, that can be very alarming, especially for our students that are wondering, what is this new class? I don't know the teacher. I don't know what's in here. What are they going to make me do? We can think about that. Not knowing, yes, that is so uncomfortable. Yeah, loss of stability. You have no idea. It's like going into something blind. And that's why I started thinking, oh, wow, now I get it. Now I get why transitions are so difficult. Fear of the unknown. We all feel this in some way when we do new things or when we don't know the language or when we're maybe in a new place. Absolutely. Unfamiliarity. All of these things are absolutely on point. So knowing this, now we can sort of think about what our students go through. Just as we've all experienced feeling overwhelmed in new, loud, or unfamiliar environments, imagine what our minimally verbal or even multilingual learners feel as they transition to new schools, initially without access to words or visuals. How do they express their basic needs and wants? They don't even know the teacher yet sometimes. So that's why Lumio's accessibility features, having visuals, having audio, and immersive reader to translate the text is so inclusive. It allows for all learners to reach what we're trying to teach them at different points. And that kind of made me think, how can I support my students more in terms of transitions? Because that's why we use visuals a lot. For visual schedules, we use that for transitions. We want to make sure that our students are successful in that. So I made this page. There's a lot of sound buttons, I know. So it might be difficult to load, but I wanted to make something where students could say their basic needs, but also if they're doing something like going to the doctor. I had a student that went to the hospital when I was teaching virtual school, and I was trying to think of ways she could advocate for herself when she had difficulty articulating that, whether she needed to see the doctor, whether she needed to see the nurse. And I found this one was funny. Get me off this board. Although I didn't say that, my text was a little bit different, but it just has things that you might need with your students.
Stop.
Really simple language for students to use.
I need help with something.
And it could be that they don't have an AAC device. Maybe they're finished and they want a snack. Maybe they want to say yes. Maybe they want help. Maybe they want to relax. Who knows? That student will tell you what they need if they have the tools to do so. And of course, we want them to know this word.
Thank you.
Well, some students can sign it, but it's really important for students to have the tools that we all have to use in different situations. So that's something that I love about the new audio feature that you can use. And we really want to enforce the power of yet. They might not be doing these things yet. Just add it before everything. I can't do this yet. She can't do more than ask for food yet. We want to think about what they can do instead of what they can't. So I made this one thing, and I'll share it too in the resources, where students get to self-select their strengths, their pictures. And so some students surprised me by the things that they believe are their strengths, and they really were. I just didn't know them well enough to know that those were their strengths, because sometimes it takes longer for us to see that. So it's a visual on Lumio where they get to put in their top strengths, the things that they find are the strengths. And you might even readjust your IEP where it's a strengths and needs based on this activity, because students can actually autonomously do this, where they choose the things that they're interested in or their strengths. We always write those, but students they don't always have a chance to write those or have input on their IEP. So I'm trying to find ways for students to do that. I even created a goal slide, but we may not have a chance to get to that today. So this is just an example of the power of yet, and this is another shouted out with the idea that we have a growth mindset. What is something that we could write that you might have seen with your students if we were having a growth mindset? What is something that maybe you've heard or something that you would rewrite instead of saying, I just can't do this? What would you tell your students, or what would you model for them in terms of growth mindset or with their AAC? Something we may not be able to do yet. For us, it's usually putting on shoes or boots because we're not there yet. We usually have to support, but some students are doing it by themselves now. So it could be writing their name. It could be something as simple as just, ask for help. And that's so important. That's one of those things that we don't even think about until it's something that we see that they're demonstrating and they really, really need help, but we may not notice that they're trying. And then when we do, we're realizing how much of a gift it is to have that communication. That's so true. Help is so important, especially when they have to use the washroom, sorting items, absolutely. Seeing challenges as opportunities to grow rather than obstacles, absolutely. It might be so easy to just look at all the obstacles and think, there is no way we're going to make it through this year or this challenge or this goal. How are we going to achieve this? But just looking at one thing at a time can be really helpful. Putting on a shirt, you never know how hard that is until you're trying to help someone do it. Embracing the failure as part of the learning process, absolutely. I am I would say, perfectionist, probably more so now than ever, and really hard on myself. And so I try to model failing for myself and for my students, and what we do with that failure and how we learn from it. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel good. They probably don't feel good too. But if we all accept it and embrace it, it gets easier sometimes. Focus on continuous improvement. Absolutely. Look at our strengths, work towards those. Some days are better than others. We're going to focus on that. And we're going to look at the strengths. And we always say, look at what they can do, what they're trying to tell you. We know what they need to work on. But the more we say and praise, I've been starting to write my report card comments, and I'm using my text to speech right now to say it out loud. And then my students hear myself saying, this student did such a great job on this. And you might not think they're listening, but they are. And they look over with this big grin on their face. They may not be able to express it, but you're saying positive things about them really means a lot, because they are hearing it, they are seeing it, and it might be the only place they are seeing it. So it's really important. I see another one here. We need to learn to incorporate symbols with words for those who are struggling to read. Absolutely. My daughter has dyslexia and she really struggles. She's still not reading and she's in grade 3. This would have been so helpful for her because she's such a visual learner. She can recognize symbols and she can use microphones, but it's the words that get backwards and jumbled up for her. And for a lot of our students, some of them may have memorized how to read, but others don't recognize words, or maybe they have a different language at home. So that's so important. I think access to visuals is a basic human right. Absolutely. Okay, so thinking on this, here's a little example of an activity that you could use, and I'll share the PDF version of it and the digital version that I created in Lumio. And it's an example of one of those when you're doing the Velcro activities and you're having students choose the right word. We've been doing core words, and this one was open because at the beginning of the year, all students need help opening their lunches. So we try to think of core words that we need now. We started with stop and go because we were trying to get students from running away, stop from running away. And then we looked at open because they all needed help opening containers. So this one was help me open, and I
Help me open.
the audio version because you can add audio to this, which you can't do to the PDF version. So this was an example of an activity that I could use, and I added instructions for my students. I even made lines to show them because on the next page it will be a handout and you'll get to try it yourself. I took the visuals that were in the PDF. So some students are using the Velcro version, some students are doing this at the board. It gives you a chance to do both. So for some students that need the differentiation, a little bit more help, the audio is especially helpful that way. So you get to try it out now and just see what your students might experience in this activity. So I'm going to show you our teacher handout and I'll just model this for you. So in this activity, and I even did the little check mark there to kind of self-correct after. For some students, you can include more visuals. For some students, it might just be 2 to select from. It depends, you know, your students, but you can start with the visual or the audio.
Help me open the box.
And then now that I know we can attach the sound buttons, you can actually have them select and listen to it if they don't recognize the word yet. So open the box. You're going to have them choose the picture that matches. I'm just coming over here. You're going to choose the picture that matches. You're going to place it over the other matching picture. And this is something that we usually do with Velcro. So you might see that, and we know it's not a window. We don't see that picture. So then afterwards, they can even self-correct and say, okay, I did it. Awesome. They are matching. We can see this. And so that's really exciting for students when they can do it themselves. And they're like, yes, I did it. And then this is something with Velcro. Actually, a lot of students like the sound of Velcro. So this is just another example. You might have been working on that one. And I'm sorry if I trimmed the page while you were still working on it. I just want to be recognizing your time as well. So each one of these is a different prompt. Help me open the box, help me open the door, help me open the window. And a lot of these work on more than one. So this is help. If your student's still learning how to say help, this uses the word help and open, which are 2 very important words that we find at the beginning of the year for Diagnostic Kindergarten, help and open. We're still getting some students to say that. We're working on it, or even just gesturing, doing the signs. And if you're doing everything, if you're doing the word, the gesture, the visual, that's total communication. You want to make sure, and even the auditory, the more communication you're putting together, the more that student has the opportunity to experience success. They're hearing it, they're seeing it, they're gesturing it. There's so many opportunities for communication. So that's an example of this one. And then what I did was a little follow-up activity. And this one isn't in the other book, but you can actually print it out and have students do these activities. And I have watched them remove the colorful pictures and symbols. So they're going to be matching the symbols, and then they're going to be making the words. For students that are doing those literacy activities, then they can actually, so what I did was I created some words here. These are the same words. And the nice thing is you can start by building a word, turn it gray. So if you want to make the word, and I'm going to just show you here, you have to unlock it first. I'm just going to move this over. I'm just going to show you. So after unlocking it, you can actually see when you click on the text, I made this word gray. I chose gray because it's kind of a shadow. My students love puzzles. They like matching things or something that's there. Some students have a difficult time matching when there's no visual there or an anchor to put it on. So what I did is I created the word first in gray. You're going to want to make sure that you layer it. So I created it and then I made a copy. I duplicated it and I made the other one. And it doesn't have to be in these colors. Actually, I found out from the literacy expert at our school that she just does them all in the same color because she's doing science of reading and she's saying we don't need to do that anymore where it's the vowels are one color and the consonants are another color. So really, whatever works for you, whatever your students are using, these are like the magnetic letters almost. And so all I didn't even bring in any letters that were like those refrigerator letters. All I did was create the word, and then I duplicated each letter so that it was infinitely cloned. So now when they go over here, it's the same size, and it's just a different color. And they have a lot of opportunities to explore with that, and then you can lock it in place when students are ready to explore that. So I usually model it with my students where they get to do this. And that's how I create their name activity as well. And I just add the colors. And once I found that worked for my students, I've been using that, and it'll be a gradual release where eventually that's not there. But for now it is. And for some students, they struggle with it's not big enough, I would create a square underneath, put the letter on and group it, and then just move that, because some students need a little bit of a larger surface to do it on. So if you wanted to try and see if that's something that's movable for you or what that might look like, and this one actually, I would have students, it's their turn, they get a turn to try it, and I'd have a little prompt, a little visual for students that are working at home, because I found a lot of times when they were working at home, parents had to support all day. That's a lot on the parents. So I was trying to find ways to facilitate learning where students became more independent, and having those visuals really helped. And now the auditory is even better. It's kind of approachable. So, and you might use something different. You might have letters that you're already bringing in, but I find students really like to build things with letters. My students love the chicka chicka boom boom activity, and so we've tried that in different ways. We've tried using familiar letters or familiar words for them, especially with our core words. And this is one example of that. And this is an example. So this year I had a bit of an epiphany where I was trying to think of ways. I'm writing the IEP goals, and I'm thinking, how are my students going to participate in this? Where is the ownership? Where is their voice in their IEP goals? A lot of it's just parent feedback or what I'm observing, but we only have 30 days to do that. So how well do I really know these little JKs that are coming in? How do I know their interests? I'm hearing it from their parents, but maybe they're not communicating yet, and maybe they have other interests we don't know. So I created this little visual, and I put it on the smartboard, and I had students self-select what one of their goals would be. Obviously, we can't do that for all of them, and we already know some things that we have to work on, but this is something that we can do for our students if we have some familiar visuals. And it was funny, one of my students chose baking and cooking, and now she's in a cooking club. Thank you, Debbie, because that is because of you. So she chose that one for her goal, and that was really special because I didn't even know she liked baking. And some of them, it might be the visual, but different things like going to the gym or working on toileting. That's not usually a very popular one, but there are different activities here students can self-select, and they can look at their goal. And then there's even kind of like a little token board where they can put a star if they've worked on that goal every day, and they can use different devices to do that. So this is an example, like we do our calendar routine every day. If they are working on communication or friendship or math or literacy, they can choose that at the beginning of the year. And I'm building one, which I will share, and it's on the next one. And I'm going to put in some visuals. You can put in your own. I created this one on BoardMaker. I wanted different visuals for the word count, because sometimes it's not just math. Math isn't very familiar to them. So if a student is working on counting, you can actually make your own visuals, whether it's in Lumio or in Canva or in BoardMaker. You can make your own visuals that work for students if you have things that are familiar to them or based on the skill that they're working on. It could be keeping their socks on, because some students just don't like socks. So it could be something like that. And they would self-select and they would put that over there, and maybe it's a goal for that week. Maybe it's not a year-long goal. And what I love about the Infinite Cloner, it allows you to do this autonomously, and they can look and see if they've done that all week. Maybe it's put their boots on independently all week. It could be as simple as that. And I love that you don't have to use a ton of paper. You don't have to spend a ton of time making this. It's just something simple and something that they can take ownership of. So I'll include that in the other one. And one of the takeaways, something that stuck with me my whole career as a child and youth worker and now an educator, students don't really care what we know until they know that we care. It's so important to make those connections with students, just get to know them. And I know we're all doing that. We may have a harder time with some than others, but we're building those connections, and all behavior is a form of communication. All expression is a form of communication. They have different ways of showing us, and we have different ways of showing them. But it's always stuck with me that I have to build those relationships first, and then we work on the goals, because the relationships are key. We want to make sure that they feel capable, and we want to make sure that they feel that they are heard, even if it's something that they're working on and they are new to. We want to make sure that we're including the student interest here. And I'm not sure how much time I have left. I'm just.
Yeah, I think we can just go ahead and move to the resources slide there, Rachel, and we can, and for everyone who's seen all these amazing things in Rachel's deck, we're going to share this out with you in our follow-up email. So maybe go to like slide 54 if we can.
Mhm.
Perfect. Awesome. And yeah, so we're going to share out Rachel's resources in our follow-up email. You'll get that later this week. You're also going to get the recording later this week because Rachel has had, as I'm sure you've seen, just an amazing number of incredible ideas for really empowering students, giving them, I love the way you talked about giving them really the autonomy, the choice and voice, and learning about them. You know, you talked about your student who is interested in cooking and never would have known if not for those amazing tools. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today, for sharing your insights, sharing your incredible ideas. Can you go ahead, Rachel, and go to the next slide? Because one of the most important things for everyone to do here. Oh, sorry, one more. There we go. Okay, so the way that you've all been fantastic participants and the way that you get your certificate for participation, I just put the link to the
Oh, you have it.
survey
Okay.
in the, yep, I put it in the chat. So if you would make sure you click that link and complete the survey, that's how you'll get your link for or your certificate for participation. We've loved having you all here. The other link I'm going to put in the chat is excuse me, 2 seconds while I get the link. The other link I'm going to put in the chat is the link just to getting more resources on Lumio. So if you are still learning about Lumio, we've got that there. We'd love to have you join us at a future webinar. And yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. You've been absolutely fantastic. And thanks to everyone who has joined us today. And we will see you all at a future webinar. Thanks,
And
everybody.
thank you so much, everyone, for coming.